So trying to go through the consistent themes that you get and like sort of what we talk about, and then there's certain things that come up time and again that I find generally, one, because I'm not very bright, that I can't really define, but I do find that when people talk about it, they don't really know what they're talking about, and one of those is usability. So I've known Mario for a very long time, and they've been doing this for a very long time, so he does actually know what he's talking about, which is why we invited him here to talk today. But,
Thank you, Ben. My name's Mario WYNANDS. I'm the Managing Director of PikPok down in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm going to be talking about usability today, and really, I guess, just the way that you can roll usability testing into your studio in a fairly cheap way, and give some of the reasons why I think usability testing is pretty important. Give some examples about how we've used it to improve our games. To give you some context and a brief introduction, our studio is based in Wellington, New Zealand. So quite some distance from here. We were established in '97, originally as a console work-for-hire retail studio, going under the brand name She, but we pivoted to digital and mobile in 2009. Now we mainly self-publish. We actually fund and publish for other smaller developers as well. Across mobile, console, and PC. We have about 80 people, and something that we've kind of grown within the studio is a range of different service teams. We have our own internal QA, our own usability testing facility, PR, marketing, customer support. So we're sort of that end-to-end solution that allows us to not only publish our own titles, but publish titles from others as well. On the console side, some of the games that we've done in the past have included things like Grip Shift, which was one of our original titles for XBLA, PSN, PSP. I'll be giving an example about the usability from that later on. We worked on Speed Racer with Warner Brothers and the Wachowskis. Madagascar Carts was something we did, but we worked across a whole range of different titles and platforms over the years, which exposed us to a lot of different control paradigms, a lot of different types of gameplay and different consumers. Now we're getting even more prolific. We're releasing more games than ever before. I think we've released about 6 titles this year, and we're probably going to release another 6 before the end of the year. Some of our best known games on mobile are Flick Kick Football, which is the Apple Game of the Week this week, Slam Dunk King, and which I'll be talking about a bit later on as well, and Monsters Ate My Condo, which is a game that we published through Adult Swim. So again, working on a whole different range of games. Looking at what usability is, I mean, it's something that a term that gets thrown around the industry a lot, and there's a fairly dry definition of what usability is from the ISO standards, which is the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. But in the context of game development, that basically boils down to how easy is it to pick up and play through a game. And that's essentially, when we're talking about game usability, the types of things that we're looking at. So usability in a game context aims to minimize frustration by targeting intuitiveness, comprehension, efficiency, and accessibility. All those things that might be barriers to somebody actually engaging with a game and enjoying that game. So it tends to look at key areas around those things like controls, user interfaces, menus, difficulty ramps, progression, those sorts of things. It's important while we're talking about usability to understand what usability testing is not. It's not for finding technical and functional bugs. That's QA and what has been talked about in other talks in this stream. And it's often confused for focus testing as well, but it's not really for comparing a game against consumer tastes and really that kind of more subjective qualitative stuff. It's really looking at those intuitiveness, comprehension things which actually transcend what an individual consumer's tastes might be. And in that sense, usability testing actually complements QA and focus testing really well, because it's looking at something that's quite different. Why use usability testing in the team? Why not just make our games intuitive and easy to comprehend and accessible to begin with? Well, the development team is really too close to be identifying all of these issues themselves. They may not have the experience. They may be all hardcore gamers when they're making a game which is supposed to be for a demographic which they just can't identify with in certain ways. So you really need a separate process, the usability testing process, to find these issues and surface them to the team where they may not be able to see them themselves. So it fits in, relatively easily into the product development lifecycle, and it works whether you're running waterfall or a Scrum-based methodology or whatever you might have, as long as there's some kind of periodic production of builds or paper-based designs or whatever it might be. You can kind of plug usability testing into that process. So whenever you have a stable build to run, which gives you the opportunity to test areas you might be interested in, you can run a usability test off of that. So after you produce that build, you can run the test, you document those findings, you talk about the findings, work out some solutions to some of the issues that may have been raised, make those changes, create another build with those changes, run another test. So usability testing, like game development to an extent, is an iterative process of testing, retesting, verifying fixes, finding new issues, and constantly refining. So ultimately, you can run your usability test cycle as many times as you want during the course of development, and for us, we do it as often as we can. It's pretty easy to run your own usability tests. For the most part, you need a test facilitator, and I'll be talking about the specifics of these different components in a moment. You need a working build that you can test against, or you can even use paper-based designs. So if you want to test, for example, menu comprehension or controls comprehension, you can actually have diagrams or paper-based designs as well. You don't actually even have to be using an interactive prototype. You want to create some sort of test plan which provides a framework for what you're going to be focused on during the testing. A group of 4 to 6 external non-industry participants, and I'll talk about why they need to be non-industry in a second. But the great thing about usability testing versus focus testing is in usability testing you only really need that small group to identify a dozen of what the key issues are in your product that would be experienced by the majority of the audience out there. So it's really powerful being able to use a small group to be able to surface the key issues within your product. And you need sort of some sort of testing lab where you can have this test take place, although it could theoretically be a corner of the office. So looking at the test facilitator, you want somebody who's not on the development team. You don't want them biased in any way. You don't want them being too emotionally attached to certain designs or functions or content, certain implementations. Really good to have somebody neutral. You want somebody personable with good communication skills and patient as well. And you want those sorts of skills not only so that they can deal well with the participants, but also there's a lot of negotiation and communication that has to go on with the development team as well. You want somebody that has an appreciation for the development process, the practices, the paradigms. They understand what's going into the game development, the challenges there. You want them to be able to talk in the language of the developers. And you also want them to have a broad knowledge of games. So in the past, we've recruited people out of masters usability programs or user interface, human-computer interface programs from college. We've also, our latest user experience expert, we promoted out of QA, really great guy that's been able to drive forward this for us. So, it could be anybody. They could have all sorts of backgrounds, but these are the sorts of traits you want. You need to create a test plan. So just, if when you're creating any new build, there may be a specific area that you're looking at. You may be wanting to test out in-game controls or level progression, the unlock structure, whether people understand how to unlock content and levels. So there'll be specific things that you want to target. And you'll want to create a task list to guide those participants towards that content. So you may task them with playing through a game session. You want to use relatively high-level language to do that because you want to guide them to the area of interest, but you don't want to hold their hand to kind of step them through. So essentially it's just a framework for the test to take place in. In terms of participants, you want people from outside of the studio. You want them non-industry, and you don't want wannabe designers. You really want consumers who don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge about development process. You don't want people that are going to come in and think they're doing QA testing for you and be looking for bugs when they should just be experiencing the game. And you don't want people to kind of come in and try to design your game for you. You just want them really to be surfacing the issues that they're experiencing. It's easy to recruit people for the most part. You can do that through studio contacts, so friends and family is a good place to start. That's ideal way to, if you're targeting games at a younger audience, to get hold of kids rather than hanging outside schools. You can recruit people through social media, so on your community forums, your website, Facebook. We had a sign in an EB store for a long time, and so we run a database of about 400 to 500 people that we've recruited over the years, that we've primarily just gotten through these methods. You want to select your participant group based roughly on the demographics of the game that you're targeting. So, if you're developing a casual game, you want to bring in a group of people that are predominantly casual players that, mostly interested in the type of game that you're wanting to play. But we like to bring in fringe people that, may only play those sorts of games occasionally, or throw in a wild card as well. Bring in somebody who's a mid-core or hardcore player. Or vice versa when we're testing one game or the other. So it's good to sort of throw that into the mix to make sure that accessibility is there. Very important not to reuse any participant on any successive test on the same game. Once you have tested somebody on a game, they are tainted. They now have background knowledge that they're going to bring into the next test, and you really want people coming into these tests with fresh eyes every time. And you also want to compensate these people with goodies and vouchers rather than cash. Again, you kind of want them there on a voluntary basis. You don't want them feeling like they're working, because as soon as it feels like work, they start looking for bugs, and that's not what you want them to do. Testing lab is just an area to actually run the tests. You want it isolated. I use the word insulated from the development team because you want it to be fairly private. You do want it away from developers. You don't want people kind of standing around, adding pressure to the participant. You basically only want the facilitator and the participant there. You want to be simulating a home environment as much as possible. So, a lot of the time when we're developing, if we're developing a console game, we're sitting in the office chair at the office desk, and our screen is like right here, and we're sort of facing this way. That doesn't give a good indication of how this game's actually going to play out. So having a couch, having the TV back there, creating an environment where the game's actually going to be played is quite important. You want to keep it free from stimulus regarding other games. You don't want any trailers or anything happening in the background. You don't want sort of control maps or anything, help screens floating around. You just want them focused on your game and not being influenced by other things. And some sort of video and audio recording is really good. You don't need to have that to start, but it becomes very useful, and we'll see why later on. So this is a photo from Ucentric in Belgium, which shows kind of a state-of-the-art testing facility. They've got the mirrored room that they're doing the testing from. You can see all the different cameras that they have, microphones. You see that kind of living room area in the background, simulating the home environment. He's got 6 screens there. So yeah, state-of-the-art facility. These are usability testing experts in Outsource House. This is kind of the high end, and this is somewhat similar to what Microsoft has, here in Redmond. Ours looks a little bit more like this. This was our older facility. We just moved to a different space within the office, but this is really all you need. Essentially, it does look like a living room. It's got the TV, it's got the consoles, it's got the couch. It's got an area where the facilitator can kind of sit, back out of the way, take notes. But we also have different webcams set up as well. In terms of the software and hardware we use Microsoft HD live cams, so we just have 3. One pointed on the participant's face, so you can see their emotions and what they're doing. One on their hands, so you can see how the controls are working, and usually one on the screen if we're not taking a direct feed from the action as well. We have Blue Iris video capture software and streaming software, so we can actually stream these videos live across the network, so anybody in the dev team can watch them unfold live with audio. We actually stream between floors in our building, and we'll have the whole dev team actually sitting around a projector, streaming all these different cameras and getting the audio so that they can sit there actually as a team and see this, see it unfold and kind of discuss as it happens too. And then just something like Excel to collate and visualize the data, and Word to pull together reports. In terms of running the test, you want to keep the participant isolated from the dev team, talk them through the tasks, but not actually through the steps they need to take to kind of complete each task. You want to get them to think out loud as they talk through, so as they're playing, ask them what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Don't ask leading questions like too much about the specifics of controls. Get them to kind of surface their feelings and what they're finding frustrating, but don't get specific about it. You want to make notes as you go, and it's especially important to note that what people say and what people think is happening is different to what they actually do. So that's where the camera on their face is quite important, because they might actually be frustrated. Even if they say they're not being frustrated, you can kind of tell from their emotion. So, just bear in mind that what people are saying and what they think they're doing is not actually necessarily what's happening. And then you can interview them to get additional thoughts, or get them to fill out a survey about other questions you might want to finish off. To give some practical examples to kind of give you some idea about the types of things that this type of testing may surface. We did a game called Grip Shift for PSP back in the day. This was actually the first game that we used usability testing on, and we found a number of things that areas that usability improved. It was particularly hard sort of game to get into. It was kind of like a cross between Super Monkey Ball and Mario Kart, so challenging game for people to wrap their heads around. One of the issues we had was you could come in and you could select any difficulty from the outset. Originally we had the difficulty levels labelled training, beginner, medium, advanced, something like that. We found 100% of our male participants would skip the training levels and just go straight to beginner, and then find the game frustrating because the things that they needed to learn in the training levels, they weren't learning, and were becoming very frustrated. That was an easy fix. We renamed the training levels to beginner and kind of redid them from there, and fixed the problem 100%, no issues. So something that, as simple as the language you use, had a big influence on people's behaviour and their enjoyment of the game. That game also had a track editor, which allowed you to create fairly elaborate tracks, and if you can imagine on a PSP, unlocking that potential, has some fairly complex controls. We had a lot of button guides on the actual screen, and we had one participant who was looking to try and do something for about 10 minutes, that was actually written explicitly in the bottom right-hand corner in the help, on the on-screen help. And finally it got to the point where the facilitator had to move on and prompted, do you think it's on the screen somewhere? And he was like, yeah, maybe, but I don't want to read that. What we actually did was we shifted the help, all of this on-screen help, into a separate screen that you actually explicitly had to go for. It didn't negatively impact any people who didn't have that problem, but it solved that sort of problem for people that, there was just too much information there that they couldn't see it in front of them. Another example, Slam Dunk King, one of our more recent games, which has had a couple of million downloads now. It's basically an arcade basketball dunking game where you can do all different sorts of tricks. We found a bit of a problem where the metrics that we were getting back from the live version implied that over 50% of people weren't using tricks in the game at all, and it's kind of built around that, and so we found that people were kind of dropping off really quickly. We weren't retaining people. So we created a tutorial system to teach each trick, and we found that initially when we put this through usability testing, you can see here all the trick types down the bottom. Some of the tricks had real problems with people not understanding how to do them. There were a lot of retries before the retries maxed out. We were able to learn a few things from those videos, change things around. On the second round, we managed to reduce the number of retries, and then on the third round reduced it even more. And we sort of, once we'd pushed out an updated version of the build, we found that this sort of pattern was reflected in the wider audience as well, but we found that our engagement numbers went up quite a lot, so and retention went up quite a lot. So this was something, identifying an issue in our live game, subjecting some functionality to usability testing and rolling that out had a real big impact on our monetization. We're running out of time, but we've got a couple more slides here. I'll just skip very quickly through the reports. Basic to give the feedback back to the dev team. You want to give them the context, the methodology you used, give a brief description of the users so that they have some context for the abilities of the players that they're seeing in the video and seeing from their responses. Typically we have gender, age, whether they're right-handed, left-handed, and the types of games and platforms they usually play. Listing out any issues which have been fixed since last time, reporting any new issues that have been found, listing out how many users are affected by that, and perhaps giving some suggestions about how those issues could be resolved. We also run questionnaires at the end. There's some focus testy type stuff that we have in there, but we try to stay away from making big decisions on that and use it sort of as more of a gradual trend over time. But it's useful to pick up sort of other comments that might be good for the dev team. One of the big things about all this is that it's really powerful, but you do face some issues with developers. There's a reluctance from artists especially, but also designers and programmers. They don't want to expose consumers to early work. They only want to show finished stuff. And kind of getting over that hump, can be quite challenging. They also both underestimate and overestimate consumers at the same time. So, it's very easy for us to, as developers, to think, well, they'll just get that. It's obvious. While at the same time, when testers, participants are in user testing, suddenly, oh, that guy's just stupid. He doesn't get it. So, they have these wildly contradictory expectations of consumers. And also, this testing is creating new work that they otherwise wouldn't have to do. You can get around this by, having a champion to advocate usability. So if you have a permanent user experience expert, that's the guy that you want pushing. You want to show them that it's a valuable tool that can make their game better. And we're now at that point where teams are engaged and actually trying to schedule usability time because they understand how powerful it is. You want to involve the team in the planning, watching the videos, the discussion afterwards, and demonstrate the improvements over time. Once they start seeing that people are enjoying the game more and it's actually you're getting rid of the frustration. It's unlocking all this fun. People get really excited about it. And you also want to educate with best practices so that some of these issues don't even come up in the first place. So, in summary, usability testing. We're looking at improved comprehension, intuitiveness, accessibility. Doesn't take much to get it going, and you can refine the process over time. You can add on to it over time. Getting that team cultural buy-in is pretty important. But as I said, there's ways that you can go about doing that. It'll make your games easier to use. It'll make your games easier to get to the fun faster. And if people are enjoying them more, then you'll sell more. So that's it. I think we're kind of out of time for questions, but
I am going to cut off on the questions, but thank you very much, Mario.
No problem.